the processing day of that beer is, it looks like a couple people were murdered back in the brew house. So starting with a 7-barrel brew house, that was
75-ish?
Yeah, I think 75 plus unique recipes that we've done in 3 years.
Out of a 7-barrel house.
That's illegal.
Oh, well, then I didn't bring that up. Cody lost his mind when he walked in. I'm not even sure how to pronounce.
It's the best game ever. It's
all right.
The best game.
It's awesome.
Welcome to Crafty Brewers, Tales Behind Craft Beer, the podcast that will increase your enjoyment of craft or local beer, whatever you call it, and the people who make it. We have traveled to Lisle, Illinois to go from grain to glass with John and April Miller. They are the owners of BubbleHouse Brewing Company. John is also the brewer here at BubbleHouse Brewing Company. We're going to share stories, and they are the stories that make each brewer unique. I'm beer drinker and Hellraiser Brian Noonan. All my opinions are strictly my own for good reason. Behind the camera is our executive producer, Cody Goff, and you may be asking, where's Catherine? Well, duh, she's in Florida. Well, why isn't she on this episode? Easy, Nosy Parker. All answers will be given when the time is correct. So that is that. First of all, congratulations, because BubbleHouse just celebrated its 3rd anniversary.
Yeah, 3 years.
Which is very exciting. It's a beautiful tap room. Now, BubbleHouse has pretty wide portfolio back there. As I walked in today and looked at the menu, a lot going on. You're the guy who makes those decisions. How do you decide what you're going to brew next? It's run its course. Maybe this style isn't coming, or there's a new style that I've heard about. Maybe I'm going to try that. What's the process for you so that it ends up for your customers?
We like to keep a wide variety there, because part of the whole house aspect of BubbleHouse is we'd like to keep something for everyone. So we always try to keep, even during the summer, there's a dark, there's always a sour, there's always hoppy, there's always light. So that's some of it is like what's running out.
Yeah, and I would say also, it's just us. So I don't have any person cracking a whip on me. Sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes that's a bad thing. But yeah, I think like April said, a lot of it is, and our menu's a little bit bursting at the seams right now because we just got done with the anniversary, and so we had 4 beers come out during that time. So we'd like to shrink the tap list down to between 14 to 16 beers and not closer to 20, but we'll get there eventually. So yeah, it's really about the drinking experience for people. So when we traveled around in our early days of craft beer, and we would stop at a brewery that was all hazy IPAs and pastry stouts,
okay,
even at the height of our enjoyment of any of those styles, there's only so much you can take of any of that. So we wanted to make sure that if you came in with a group of people, there was an easy drinking, the Mexican lager that we brew now.
Which is this one?
Yeah, which started as a just one-off kind of collaboration to work with the Lisle Park District and get beer featured at their concert series. And now it's a year-round beer for us.
Okay.
It's probably, I say I brew the most of 10 Second Hug. That might be now a lie with Isle of Lisle, just because it's the most approachable beer. So anybody who walks in will drink that beer and enjoy it for the most part. Not everybody's going to reach for a hazy IPA.
And is that, obviously that's what you want. You want somebody to come in who maybe doesn't know, maybe they know a little bit, but if they drink this, then you've opened their mind to go, oh, well, if I like this, I can try this.
There's always friends and family that come in that are not brewery goers.
Right.
So we have other things available for them, but then there's always folks that come in and say, I drink Coors Light, I drink Miller Lite, I drink Bud Light, and usually what am I going to like? And that is a nice, approachable.
And I also think it speaks to, as a brewer, you want to be able to showcase a beer that is clean and simple, and it just tastes like beer.
Yes.
And you can show that, like,
beer.
I don't need to hide behind a lot of hops or adjuncts or any of that stuff. Like, this beer doesn't have off flavors. It is just the sum of its parts, and that's really what we're trying to present. So, like, as the trend has gone to lower ABV beers lately and more lagers, like, we are definitely leaning into it. I love producing those beers, and I think they're a good presentation of the quality of beers that we can produce, the balance of those flavors, and not having to rely on just loading it with strawberry puree or, any number of like stuff that just kind of mask over what may be imperfection to those beers.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. And this is no shade to any other brewer or any other beer, but it would seem to me as a layman, it's more difficult to make a really good, simple beer consistently than it is, as you said, this is a little off, but if I add this to it, oh, people are going to like it, so it doesn't really matter what the base is. Where this, the Isle of Lyle, I could sit and drink this all day, which is, one, a problem, and two, probably what you're looking for.
I've done that.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, I think if you look at the beers that we produce, we're really trying to produce beers that are core styles and just slightly stretching those boundaries. So I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel here. I really want to show that we understand what these styles are supposed to be, and we understand, I think of it a lot in the creative perspective, a lot like cooking, of like, okay, you brew this beer, you really want to accent these flavors. And how do you do that? It's by just balancing all the ratios of malt, hops, water, and yeast that you're kind of putting into all these beers. So, for us, that menu represents a lot of that. Is we don't have a ton of crazy Lucky Charms, hazy IPAs
that was
and things like
disappointing,
that.
I'm not going to lie. Like, any breakfast cereal beers?
And that's not to say we don't like to play around with ingredients, but it's really in service of the beer as opposed to buzzwords for me. And I don't want to get all high and mighty because I know how this stuff sounds on audio.
You tend to make beers that are well balanced. So whatever you're trying, whatever new thing you try tends to be balanced well so that it's approachable. The sours are not overly sour.
Okay.
Those kinds of things.
Or overly fruited
right.
Yeah. But I think that balance is what makes beer great, and what makes people want to drink the same beer again and again is that sort of cycle of sweetness, bitterness, cleansing your palate, coming back to more, and like having all those flavors. That's why beer is great, because it provides that sort of distinct palate interruption all the time that I think is really cool.
This is the question I ask everybody, and especially if it's a young married couple who seems to have their life together. What brought you to this crazy life of brewery ownership and brewing?
I'll let John start.
So I worked for 18 years for Bank of America out of college, and I started homebrewing in 2003, right about the same exact time. So this is just one of those things where, 5 years turned into 10 to 15, and we sort of realized that if we were ever going to make a change of lifestyle, it should be sooner rather than later.
Banking to brewing is a huge change of lifestyle.
Yeah, it was. Thoroughly enjoyable change of lifestyle too. Okay. So, yeah, it was just one of those things where we had kicked tires on a bunch of ideas, and it always came back to brewing because it was the one hobby that had kind of followed us through before we knew each other, all the way through our courtship, marriage, kids, everything. So by that time, that was 2016. I think I started courses at COD, College of DuPage, Business of Craft Beer, just to kind of see if this was really the thing that we could go deep on. And it turned out, yes, we could. So
you meet a guy who has a pretty stable life in the banking industry, and he tells you, you know what? I brew at home too, and that sounds fun. What's the pitch like from John when it's, hey, maybe we should, or did you make the pitch?
I think, told him he should.
Wow, how does that come about?
Well, because, so his dad was a high school art teacher. So there's a very artsy side to John that was dying in corporate life.
Oh, okay.
So he was doing a lot of creative things just to scratch that itch. And let's just say that when you drink his beer, you're drinking his art. And then he gets to also scratch the itch with, doing some art on the boards and all the creative stuff with posts and like whatever else. So like he finally gets to do the creative side of life, and he's a happier individual that way. We're both busier.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But it's a more well-rounded life for all of us. And I love that our kids get to see us striving at something hard and the successes and the failures that come with that, and just see what life is really like when you're doing your own thing.
So when you go to COD for the business of brewing classes, what's that like? You're coming in and like, who else, what other kind of people were in the class? Was it younger? Was it older? Was it everybody?
So there's a lot of people in the industry now that were in some of those classes, and I have a terrible recollection of names, but like Katie Wolf from Wolf Den, Ross, who's now brewing there as well, he was in those classes. Corey, who brews over at Miskatonic. So there's a photo somewhere of like 6 of us or so that were in some of those initial classes at COD doing those classes. They were great. Again, it was just me trying to go deeper in the world of beer and just make sure this wasn't just some like, hey, I brew beer in my garage. Like this would be a good thing to do. Like that just seems like an insane. April and I are not the type of people to just kind of like, throw everything to the wind and be like, I don't know, it might work. So we were really. Some might say we took too much time to get BubbleHouse going and get the idea ramped up, but we really wanted to make sure that we were truly invested. We had the information and the knowledge behind us that we felt comfortable opening a business. So it was, I love those courses. I got to meet a bunch of cool people. I use them a lot too I did the level 1, level 2 Cicerone certifications down in the city. So a lot of those courses towards the tail end, I didn't go through the entire program. Sorry, COD. But a lot of them were preparation for doing the level 2 Cicerone exam, the off flavors, the essays, that kind of thing, and style and everything else, that just to kind of make sure that I was developing my palate, developing my knowledge of things above and beyond just what I knew from the homebrew world.
For those who don't know, explain the Cicerone program, because it's very complicated and very tough to get those levels, right?
Yeah, in layman's terms, a lot of people recognize it as like a sommelier for beer.
Okay.
So it's really about understanding everything from the process of brewing to the process of serving, glassware, off flavors that you get either through process imperfections or unclean line imperfections, all the way through, just understanding the historical background of styles, what the ranges of color, ABV, bitterness, all those things, what the common ingredients for those styles are. So just really everything about from producing, serving, tasting beer, just an in-depth kind of deep dive. And it goes all the way up to, I think then it's advanced and then master. So I stopped after level 2, which is, I think the next one is advanced and the following is master. But again,
seems pretty good.
Yeah, it was for me.
Level 2 was kind of intense, though. There was a lot of sampling, and
that sounds horrible.
you had to taste things and know what style it was.
I was going to ask, do you have to be able to discern the smell and the taste of different hops and all the other ingredients?
It doesn't go so far as to pinpoint ingredients in beer, but a big component is off flavor evaluation. Not only perceiving the off flavor that's in the beer, but also identifying what the cause could be for that off flavor. Is it a process off flavor? Is it, like I said before, the lines were not cleaned properly, and so now there's bacteria growing in the lines. So some of those things. So we used to do a thing where I would go and buy a bunch of random beers at Binny's or wherever, stick them down in our basement fridge, and then I would just have April go down and
He'd be like, go. We'd grab a tasting glass, and I'd go down and pour it, and bring just the tasting glass back up. And the kids really got into it because they're like, well, what happens if Dad gets it right? What happens if Dad gets it wrong?
That's a good question. Did you have to sleep out in the garage if you got it wrong?
Never got it wrong.
Wow. Nice flex. Before we get into the beers and the way, a big step for you, I got to know, April, what's with the name? What is it? There's got to be a meaning behind BubbleHouse.
Yeah, so BubbleHouse, there was a lot of brainstorming with names, if I'm being honest. There were definitely names thrown out between the two of us that we would look up on Untapped and go, well, there's already beers or breweries named that. And so, that went to the wayside. But throughout the naming process, it always came back to we really wanted to grow a community, and we wanted to we loved meeting new people at breweries, and that, so house kind of came from that friends and family, like welcome our friends, make new friends, like bring families and things. So the house kind of came from that. And then, John's brother and sister-in-law have a farm, so they have a farmhouse and we have a BubbleHouse. It kind of fits that way. But then the bubbles are part of brewing, from brewing through fermenting and serving and all of that. And ideas bubble up when people come together and those kinds of things. So it just kind of fit on a lot of levels, and it sounds fun.
It does sound fun.
Yeah, there's an energy to it that we really liked in terms of, just being kinetic energy in the space. And that's what we loved about craft beer coming up in the community before we were ever involved or thought we would be involved. So that's been a big kind of driver for us, is to drive positive energy in a space where people get together and,
It does have a nice, light, lively feel to it. It's like, bubbles. We're just going to float around, have a good time. All right. One of the you also said you went through the COD business classes. You got certified as a Cicerone, but then your big break, if I can put it that way, came when you got in the spare key program at Skeleton Key.
Absolutely.
Explain what that is and how you got involved.
So again, as we were kind of going back and forth on these ideas, a lot of it was, part of our hobby was just to go and check out new spots.
Sure.
And at that point in the mid, 2010s, there was a lot of new spots popping up,
Yeah.
a lot of good beer happening in the Chicago craft beer scene. So there's a lot of ideas that we kind of came across. So I don't remember when we first kind of came across Skeleton Key, but heard about this program. At that point, I was probably at the peak of my home brewing in those days, doing a lot of stuff in the garage. We had gone and gotten this rig from the owner of Shorts Brewing up in
Michigan.
Yeah, God, I'm drawing a blank on the way up north in Michigan, Traverse City.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I was doing.
So your garage setup was that big.
Well, this thing was on a mount, and it was a 3-vessel
The pots
system.
are essentially kegs.
Yeah, so they were half barrel kegs cut open. So it was
But on a cart, so it's all piped together.
an HLT, a mash, and a boil. Had a recirculating pump. It was great.
Nice.
It really allowed us to dial in recipes and work on consistency of those recipes back at that time. So I was really producing a lot of beer. One of those beers was a Kolsch, which is got a bigger backstory to it. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit more later. But yeah, we found out about this program at Skeleton Key, and so the starting point was a homebrew competition.
Okay.
So I entered that Kolsch in, which is a beer, one of the beers that we had brewed the most of back in the day in homebrew, trying to get it perfect is a little bit too of a buzzword, but trying to get to a point that we really felt it represented some of the stuff that we had sampled on our honeymoon in Germany. Fine, I'll get it. That's the story.
That's the root of the story.
We drank it in Germany. We liked it. That was it.
So, we heard about that. That beer got first place in its category, whatever it was. And so then they did an interview process and kind of asked, are you serious about doing this brewery thing? And at that time, it was still early on. But
That has
I think,
to be a scary question, right?
yeah. But, we had a loose business plan. And I think at that time we were about as serious as you could be without truly being serious in terms of we didn't have structure of loans and all that stuff. Right. We had no location in mind, any of that.
We were on the precipice of getting super serious.
But I think that they could, I think that they understood based on talking to me that this was something that we were really invested in, something I'd been passionate about. Because at that point I'd been homebrewing for, 12 to 14 years or so.
All right, well, we want to get back to more of your philosophy of brewing and the beers that you guys do. John and April Miller are with us. This is BubbleHouse Brewing Company in Lisle, Illinois. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, it's dealer's choice. So a beer that you guys want to highlight, something you want to talk about, but I want to get into more of when you left the program at Skeleton Key and how this all came to be.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
And we're back at BubbleHouse Brewing Company in Lisle, Illinois. The address, 2121 Ogden Avenue. What unit? Oh, you got to go to Unit A. You can't really miss it. Big sign out front, and it is a beautiful tap room. John and April Miller are here. They are the owners. John is also the brewer here at BubbleHouse. All right, we started to talk about you going through the Spared Key program at Skeleton Key before you opened BubbleHouse. What does that program entail, and how did it prepare you for when you finally made the jump and came here?
Yeah, so it was one of those things where they give you access to sort of not only brewing with them in the back of the house, but also bartending experience, kind of how they set up their business and how, it's easy to say that I brew beer in my garage, but it's harder to say, how do I go about opening the doors every day, taking people's money, selling them beer, creating a whole business structure around it, employees, insurance, all that thing. So they really open a lot of their information, their books, behind the scenes to
Any
me.
question we had, they were willing to answer.
Which is why over
amazing.
our front door you'll see a skeleton key that hangs above it, and that's in honor of them, because I really do feel that they were. Yes, April gave me the first big push that I needed to kind of get this dream going. They were the ones that made it seem like it could definitely be a reality, and were I mean, they still to this day are hugely supportive of us.
I mean, when we found this space, Emma, you know how like you're first buying a house, like
Sure.
you ask your dad or whatever to come check out the space. We asked Emily to come check out the
Nice.
space.
Emily, fun fact, first person to swear on this podcast.
Oh, nice.
Yes. So now everybody's free to swear.
I've heard many other people swear on this podcast.
Yes, they have. Emily was the first. It was very exciting. Yes, but listen, it's not for the faint
21
of
and
heart.
over.
All right, so let's get to the beer because you mentioned the Kolsch was the one that won you the contest, and then you have the IPA that you've been brewing. Do you remember back when you were still in your garage, the first recipe that you got away from the kits, you got away from that, and it was truly your recipe?
It's probably 10-second hug. So it was a hazy IPA. It's probably the one that most of our friends and family, that was the one that they got behind. It was during the haze craze of the middle 2010s, and everybody was drinking them, everybody was making them, and so back in that day, it was kind of new and fresh to have all these bursting hot flavors. So that's a beer that we still make today, and it's one that I can remember sharing with people, and people, it's hard when you're a home brewer because everyone tells you everything's great. And everyone, and if you're
I was
anything,
going to say, how do you know? How do you know?
if you're anything like me, very little reaches that great pinnacle. I'm probably my own worst critic. So when your family and your friends are all saying like, "Oh yeah, this is great," in the back of your head, you're going like,
What do they know?
This could be a lot better. That becomes like not frustrating, but you're like, do I really know if these beers are actually good? Well, this one is when you bring it to parties and it's gone.
There you go.
And people are asking
And then
for
people
more
ask
of it.
for it again and again. Yeah.
And so that beer was one where, and again, hazy IPAs became popular because they opened up the experience of hop forward beers to people who didn't like bitter bombs that were really, resinous and astringent on your palate. So people they were new and exciting. So a lot of people got behind that beer, and it was a lot of fun to see people respond to it. So that's still probably one of our best selling beers. Definitely the beer I brew the most of here.
Really? Well, you mentioned traditional styles, and the beer you wanted to showcase is a traditional style. It is it's a traditional style, like you said, but then
it's a little
stretched a little bit.
A little bit,
just
yeah.
a little bit. So what is this beer, and what's the history of it?
So Smoky Poofs is our rye smoked porter. So it is a base porter with a little bit of rye malt and a very small percentage of cherry wood smoked malt as well. Ooh. So, the one thing we always tell our staff and our customers is that make sure that people taste it first, because it is not a smoke beer. It does not present a ton of smoke. It's a lot of chocolate, a lot of roast, and then the smoke is just a light touch on the back end.
It's called Smoky Poofs because there's a little bit of smoky.
So it's one of those beers that I really like rye as an ingredient. I think it's a great sort of it helps you accent flavors, especially we have a rye IPA that we do as well, and that little bit of spice kind of I think can lift some other flavors in beer. Is that what
it is about rye, the spiciness?
Yeah, and that's the main thing. You get a little bit of that kind of rye spice, and it can really lift and support hop flavor. In this beer, I think it helps to kind of create a little bit more depth of flavor, so you get a little bit of chocolate and roast, but then there's a little bit of sharpness from the rye. And then the smoke really helps to kind of dry out the back end. So it's a sweet beer up front, but it's actually very dry on the back end. It's only 5.5% alcohol. So for a fall beer, this is kind of our go-to. As we were talking off mic, it's the first beer that I ever brewed in this building on the large-scale equipment. And
so it usually comes out about anniversary time, just for nostalgia.
It's fall, so I think we brewed it first in September. When we were just starting going. And, to be honest and blunt with all your listeners out there, this beer has a lot of flavor and things going on in it. So I felt like of any beer, if I wasn't quite hitting the mark on that first go-round, that this would be a great beer to start out with. It turned out very well, and it immediately got a lot of followers.
I was going to say, how was it initially received?
It was received very well. And, there's people to this day that this is probably one of their favorite beers that we do here. So fall they're always asking, is it coming back? And I said, yeah, in fall it will come back. And now I'll say that the version we're drinking today, I'm can probably say with 100% certainty that is heads and tails above the version that I produced 3 years ago. But that version was not bad. I just think that we've kind of honed in and kind of, simplified and kind of as a whole beer from start to finish, it drinks a lot better.
When do you guys know that a beer is done? Like you mentioned, okay, for 3 years you've been refining this one, and is it, in your estimation, is it done where, like, if you continue to tweak it, it might go the other way? Or is there still something? Because you mentioned earlier that you seem like a guy who never is satisfied.
Never.
Yeah, I think
any project he ever does.
To me, that's kind of a two-part question, right? I think there's the recipe development and the balance of ingredients, and then the things that you can tweak during process. Okay. So to me, a lot of the beers that we've brewed, I feel very confident in them in terms of the ratio of ingredients and what we're trying to highlight as a flavor component. And then from there, it's tweaking temperature, whether that's mash temp, fermentation temperature, the timing of how long we let things go, the carbonation that you put on a certain beer or a certain style. So a lot of that to me is, a two-part. So recipe-wise, I feel like when I brew this beer perfectly, the recipe is spot on. Okay. So I think it's really been in some of the production steps that we do. And as a small bootstrap brewery, we're constantly adding tools to our tool belt that maybe we didn't feel like we could afford at the start of the process that we now can use to kind of ensure that our consistency is maintainable throughout the lifespan of the brewery. And to me, that's really important because we've brewed a ton of different recipes here.
Yeah.
That was starting with a 7-barrel brew house.
75-ish?
Yeah, I think 75 plus unique recipes that we've done in 3 years.
Out of a 7-barrel house. Is that what you're at now?
Yeah. So we picked 7 barrels as a brew house mainly so that we could turn batches and always have something new. Okay. And we've there's a love-hate relationship with that because there's certainly some people who want to come in and they want to drink Isle of Lyle every time they're here.
All the time.
And so we're falling into Hug, Isle of Lyle, some of these beers being around almost year-round. Yeah. At this point, they're pretty much year-round because, you don't want to piss off customers who are here supporting you and they're like, that's my beer.
Yeah,
but we still want to be playful.
How hard is that then to balance the wants of your customers because you are in business with your artistic desire to, I know this is good, but for a couple months, I want you to try this.
I think it's a balance, and again, I will never say that my creative integrity is ever hurt. We were very upfront about it early on, in that we are a service business, and so the only thing that matters is what the customers and the community want to drink and what they appreciate. So I could think that one beer that we produce is the best in the world. If nobody wants to drink it, then that's the fool's errand to continue to tell people that they should really enjoy this beer.
People would ask us before or right when we opened, what are your flagship beers going to be? And our answer was always, I don't think I get to decide that.
We can tell you what we think they're going to be, but you're going to decide.
But Isle of Lyle was not on our radar, and it quickly became a flagship.
And some of those have become apparent. And then, like April just said, Cosmic Popism, which is a hazy IPA that the College of DuPage was doing a Warhol exhibit last summer, I believe, and they asked if we would do a beer, to kind of coincide with that. And so we produced this beer. It's
got like a soup label in honor.
I saw that in the cooler. What was that?
And
it got its name because Cosmic is in it, but also there was a book, something Popism, that was about Andy Warhol.
Oh, okay.
So anyway, that beer quickly was everyone flipped their lid on it. I was going to say flip their shit, but I don't want to swear. So
listen, we were PG all the way up to now. Now we're going full explicit the last few minutes.
Oh, goody. But that's a beer that we were we may never brew it again. And now it's in the rotation because there's so many
Everybody
people
loved
that.
it.
So then do you just walk around with your chest all puffed up look at what a genius I am. I created this beer that everybody wants to drink.
No, he doubts himself constantly.
No, yeah. There's a lot of self-doubt, a lot of
He's lucky you're here, April.
Do these people know what they're actually drinking? Why do people like this beer? I don't know.
I made this in the bathtub. What's happening? It's not working. We've had a number of conversations on this show with Catherine about well, breweries should just, they should just brew beer. They shouldn't have to do other things to draw people in, which I think is hogwash. But you guys have a lot of games, and I must ask you, because Cody lost his mind when he walked in. I'm not even sure how to pronounce
Crokinole.
Crokinole. What is Crokinole? There are these giant boards over here, and I guess people...
It's the best game ever. It's
all right.
The best game.
It's awesome.
Right?
It's
pretty awesome.
It's probably the best pub game that nobody knows about.
Yeah.
If you haven't been here or to Canada, or like April and I discovered it as far away from Canada in the U.S. as you could, in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Oh, my God. Eating
Before
green
we
chilies
were
and playing
engaged, even.
Crokinole?
Yeah.
So we were, visiting breweries, whatever, in Albuquerque.
Marble Brewing in
And
Albuquerque.
we happened upon it, and the locals were out playing it, and we couldn't get a turn, and so finally we were like, hey, what's this game? And then you couldn't find it because it's like handmade because it's a round wooden board.
Okay.
So we couldn't find it, and it was back before we were
Also, we may
in
have
those
spent
days.
3 hours drinking and playing this game once we were let in.
Oh, man.
I could not,
Absolutely. There's
I could
no
not
mayhem. We
remember
did.
the name of it when we got home.
But then that was like before smartphones and stuff. So like we couldn't find it online and like all the things. Fast forward like probably 8 years or something like this. And we were like, what was that game? Like once BubbleHouse started to become a thing, we were like, we got to have Crokinole. So we looked it up. We bought this board. It's not very travelable, but we started traveling with it to friends and family. And pretty soon several of them bought it. And we were like, see, it's a thing. It's awesome. It's not just us. So it's sort of like the game board is concentric circles.
Okay.
So you flick little, they call them biscuits because it's Canada based, but
Yeah,
they're little they're little like wooden discs that you flick, and the scoring is very like bags-esque, where it's
It's like a combination of curling and
10,
bags.
Yeah, so 5, 10, 15, and then there's a little ring in the center that fits one token. That's 20. And, you cancel each other's scores out and things, but then because you're flicking them, it's kind of curling that way, and you are trying to, and then there's little bumpers.
I saw the little
that
pegs
try
like
to
around
keep
that.
you
yeah.
out of the 15 and 20 range, and you have
Okay.
to like knock out, you have to touch an opponent's
Right. Before?
But
Yeah,
what,
there are
as you
some rules
flick
that
it.
make it great. The reason why it's a great pub game is that nothing matters until it's your turn. Because the board is constantly changing. So
That's
it's
my
really
favorite part of it is
yeah.
you can pay zero. You can be awesome and play a tournament and like know all the things, or you could just go, hey, it's my turn. Flick. Okay, now I'm going to go back to drinking and talking. And then when it's my turn again, and you
Then
can
I'll
play
pay
it.
attention.
Usually it's played 2 or 4 person, but you can play 3 person.
Okay.
So we had a Crokinole League last winter, and I think we'll do it again this year. And I've heard from many people that we were their first introduction into the game, and so that's been very cool.
Yeah.
I had
so
never
we have
heard
3
of it.
boards,
And they're giant. They're
they're
crazy.
pretty big.
They're as big as the table.
handmade in Canada.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh man. No, I had never heard of it. I was looking stuff up, and I was like, and
I had heard of
Cody,
it, and I might
like I
join
said,
your
lost his
Crokinole
mind.
League. And my friend Dave, who introduced me to Crokinole, also lives somewhat nearby, and I'm going to try to get him to be
Awesome.
my teammate.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
I
yeah.
was so stoked. As soon as I saw it, I lost my mind. He ordered his board from Canada,
Yeah.
just like you guys did. I mean, last time I played it, I was at a gaming event. Actually, when I walked in, I said to your bartender, I was like, Crokinole, what nerd found this? Like... Because
nerds.
my friends and I are gamers. We play like long board games, but last time we played was at a friend's party, and we put on some 80s music, and it felt like we were in some cheesy 80s movie, and we're just sitting there drinking beers.
Yeah.
And doing it in a brewery sounds. Do a lot of people that come and play it?
Yeah, there's a fair amount. And the great part is that it's like you could play it with your kids too, right? Like we
Yeah.
have a picture of our son at like age 7 playing with John on like a Sunday morning in his PJs.
well, and you guys have a ton of. I love going to a tap room where I can appreciate the beers, but there's something to do, and whether it's playing, Yahtzee or some kind.
Yeah.
You have a million board
We have a
games
whole
over
bookcase
there.
of-
yeah.
Yeah.
And
So back to your original question, and we
how'd
love
you get into this business?
No, yes. Let's go back. We love you, Catherine, but I wish that brewing beer was the only thing you had to do. I think it is very important to give people a space and activities and things to really draw them in and make them stay, have a good time.
Yeah.
I think as much as busy parents and small business owners, it'd be great to just brew beer, walk away, have people come in, pay money for the beer
Sure.
and be done. I think giving them a space and events and games and all that stuff that's what people associate with the craft beer space.
Well, and just like if my wife and I go into a tap room, if we just go in and have beer, maybe we'll have 2 beers. If we're playing a game, suddenly we're there for a while, and that 2 beers, maybe you sell an extra 1 or 2 beers, and then we're staying around, and other people are staying around.
We would take our kids with us all the time when they were younger, and we'd bring games with us, and some snacks, and make an activity out of it.
It's a brilliant move.
Because breweries are one of the only places you can bring kids. Because typically they're you can let them run around a little bit. I mean, I'm sure you don't love.
I was going to say I would be remiss if I didn't say
much.
that we have a love-hate relationship with. We love good parents. That's all I can say.
There you go. And you also are pet friendly out on the patio, right?
On the patio, yeah.
Only people in here. Dogs are okay.
Yeah.
Humans only inside. Dogs and humans outside. We're good with that.
Yeah, the health department says.
I like that. I also like the fact that you can sit with the dog.
Yeah.
If I could ask real quick, then, so there's so many cool things about this place. You've got stuff to do. Like, it's a really great space. It's very inviting. You have a beer for everybody, right? So how do you, what do you tell people when you're like, I run BubbleHouse Brewery. Here's why you should come. Like, or have customers given you feedback as like, this is the thing that really keeps us coming back? Because I'm just curious with all these different offerings, some places are like, oh, we brew these IPAs and they're great. But there's so much, it's kind of like, what do you focus with that?
I would actually say that sometimes I forget, or because I brew the beers, that I feel a little bit, it's hard for me to sell the beers as much as we should. Because I believe in the beers that we produce. I think they're high quality. I think the people that come in respect the product that we're making, but a lot of it is the community. It's and our staff as well. I think I would say 75% of the positive reviews we get, and we get mostly positive reviews. Thank you, everybody. If you haven't reviewed us, review us. But they mention our staff, right? And I think that was key to April and I, is when somebody walks in the door, they better feel welcome within the first 30 seconds, because we've been to plenty of places where we felt like we weren't cool enough to be there, even though we now own a brewery.
Yeah.
And so we really we don't care where people came from. We really want them, the minute they walk in the door, is you don't have to know anything about beer. We're just glad.
Or you could know everything.
Yeah, we don't care. We're glad that you're here, and we feel like we will help you find a beer on this menu that you appreciate and enjoy. And from there, the rest of it is up to sort of them and the people that
Or you're
come
here with people that love beer and you want something else to drink. We'll find something, hopefully, that'll make you happy for the night.
Well, yeah, you've got a few things. You've got some
we have some
ciders
wines
and some
and
wine
ciders
and different
and
things for
seltzers and
people.
things.
Which
We don't produce them all, but we have them.
But I think that's something that wasn't present in a lot of tap rooms when they opened. It was, so
Laws
maybe
changed.
If I love beer, but the person I'm coming with isn't a beer person, well, I can't really go here.
Yeah.
I gotta go to a more
Only
traditional
within the
bar.
last few years, where since we opened, was that legally allowed.
And with the live music and trivia and private event space, we've just discovered that has to be there. If you're coming here to see someone play music, or you're coming here for somebody's birthday party, and you don't drink beer, you're gluten intolerant, whatever it is, we have to have options.
Yeah, so that house part of BubbleHouse comes back to, we get told they love our vibe, or they love, our staff is just a cheerful place, which that's always what we wanted
you're
it to be.
hosting them.
Yeah,
It
that's
is
always
like an
what we
extension
wanted.
of your house.
Yeah.
All right, it is time for the Final Four. The
All
same
right.
questions that we ask every brewer. April, feel free to jump in and help out if you need to. No cheating. I know as a teacher, do I have to put up the privacy folders over my paper so
No,
you're
we're
not
good.
looking
We're good.
over? Okay.
No privacy folders.
This is a public podcast too, so I've heard it before. So
That's true.
Brian, what's your policy on using AI for answers?
Yeah, right.
Wow, I am against it.
Can you tell I'm married to a teacher?
Yes. No way. Well, I also don't see any devices, so that would be pretty
no
good.
devices.
Unless they have chips in their heads to get the AI going.
Not
All right,
yet.
the hill you'll die on, John. The one beer, it doesn't matter. Everybody could say this is the greatest beer of all time, but for whatever reason, you will not brew it.
I'll caveat this by, we've watched so many breweries start their process by saying, this is us, we will never do X, Y, or Z. So I'm very reticent to say anything that we won't do.
We will never. Our hill to die on has always been never say never.
Never
You
say
never.
never.
Know. However,
But lactose.
Okay.
Probably lactose. So I've never used lactose in any of our beers. I don't as a consumer, I don't like it. I don't like milkshake IPAs. I know that several people that have answered this question have said that, so I'm not going to only zero
Just
in
about
on that.
everybody has.
But
Every brewer
But
hates
also,
lactose.
if we use lactose, it would definitely be, if the day ever came, it would be on the label. Because as a teacher, I can't help myself, but like I know there's a lot of dietary restrictions out there.
Yeah.
So I've heard news of like they use it, but it's not on the label. All those things. If we ever did swallow our pride,
3 years
Sell
in,
out your artistic integrity. Is that okay?
3
All right.
years and no lactose yet, so I would say it's close
none
to
on the
never,
horizon.
but like, you know.
You have no inkling that you will ever
No.
use it.
The people demand it, and we've had demand, and we did one variant of a 10-second hug that had vanilla and strawberry puree in it, and I thought it looked god awful because it was kind of a one-off thing that we tried for a member party, but everyone who
we had
drank
like
it,
a sixtel of it.
the flavor everyone loved, and I was like, all right, well, there's no lactose in that beer still, but it's still a little bit more kitchen sink than I would like to admit a beer deserves to be.
Fair enough. All right. Question number 2. A beer that you brewed and it was popular. You liked it. Your customers liked it. But for whatever reason, you're just not going to do it again.
Ooh, that's a hard one.
So we have our
I saw
old,
all the graveyard. It's like Ben and Jerry's with the graveyard of old beers back there.
So now the good thing is a lot of those we are just pulling the board down, putting it up when they come back on. So I will say, this sounds so stupid, but like I've never had a beer come out that we thought was inherently bad or didn't deserve to be brewed again. What
Those
I will
didn't
say
get
is,
released.
what I will,
Well, I mean, like, maybe it was the ingredients were just a pain in the ass to work with, or
Cranbach? No, just kidding.
yeah.
So we do a cranberry
sour.
sour every year, and we are in the process of doing it right now with hundreds of pounds of fresh Michigan cranberries and cinnamon and all these spices. And I'll never stop doing that beer because it has been extremely popular. And every
like
year
holiday in a glass.
every year that we
Okay.
exist, it's gotten more and more popular. But the processing day of that beer it looks like a couple
lot
people
of
were
work.
murdered back in the brew house. So that beer will always be produced. But what I will say is that what we found out is that we tried a lot of different attacks on same style. So I've probably done 4 iterations of dry hop golden ales. I'm probably not going to continue brewing 4 different dry hop golden ales. So we kind of have the ones that are popular. Those are the ones that we're going to continue brewing. So there may be some that fall by the wayside. So I think, again, going back to the small brew house system, what we're trying to tailor in is what are the beers that people respond to and what are the flavor components they respond to. And so some of those will probably hang up there forever and may never be brewed again. But it's mostly because there was different iterations on them that were better or more presented better to me or to our customers. That's the clear winner.
Yeah, you can only have so many recipes that keep living.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. This is for both of you. And it doesn't have to be one of your beers, but it can definitely be one of your beers. Your go-to off-the-clock beer. Like at lunch in the break room when the kids are driving you crazy.
That's illegal.
Oh, well, then I didn't bring that up.
I mean, honestly, rum and Coke is like a seasonal thing for me.
It's not a beer.
I understand, but that's
But
a
if
common
maybe
thing.
it doesn't have to be
But
a
then,
beer. Maybe that's your
besides
drink.
that, I would say oftentimes it's light stuff like Mexican lagers is a go-to for me. But then as I go into the fall season, it'll be Marzens, and then as I get into the winter season, it'll be Schwarzbiers. Those are like constant for me.
I sound pretty basic, but I do love High Life. I know it's a very
It really does live in our fridge all the time.
that, and then so back before I was ever a brewer outside of my garage, I used to buy ingredients from Brandon, the owner of Workforce Brewing.
Okay.
Before he even had Workforce Brewing. So they're formerly known as IPA is still kind of what I always look at. And when I have it at home, it goes very quickly because I'm like, I'm going to save those. And then they're gone a day later or whatever.
It is not. It's a basic answer only because brewers seem to the person, love to drink High Life.
There's
when
something
they're
about
off.
the experience of the bottle. I hope there's no brewer out there that you cannot argue with consistency.
Yeah.
So being able to produce a beer that is that basic and clean and sort of simple and have it always hit the same marks, that's great.
Well, it's kind of what we
kudos, you
talked
know?
about before. The simple beers
Yeah.
are the toughest, but to mass produce it for that long at that consistency.
And good on them. Miller Brewing Company was already taken, apparently, so
Yeah,
we
really?
have to go with BubbleHouse.
Good going.
All right, champagne of beers. Last one. This is a newer question. Pick one of your beers and what food it would pair best with.
So, for me, I think actually one of my favorite food pairing beers is this smoked porter.
Smoky Poofs.
I think any kind of barbecue, chili, anything on the grill, really, it really helps accentuate a lot of the sort of, caramelized flavors that you get out of grilling. Through that Maillard reaction, and then that smoke kind of ties in a lot of that. And as I said, it's sweet up front, it's dry in the back, and that's for a food beer. That to me, that's what you really want is something that kind of, brightens your palate on the start, cleans it on the finish, and then allows you to kind of refresh as you go and take another bite, take another sip, and that, that cycle is what makes beverage and food so enjoyable to kind of pair together.
Do you have a different one, April, or are you going to
I'd
stick
probably
with this
be
answer?
Isle of Lyle for similar reasons, though.
That
Yeah, the
seems like it would
Mexican
go with
lager.
just about
Yeah.
every food.
Yeah,
And can't beat that.
hard to go wrong.
Hard to go wrong. John and April Miller are the owners of BubbleHouse Brewing. John is, of course, the brewer behind all the fantastic styles we've talked about today. Smoky Poofs is the smoked porter, but the rye smoked porter, a little bit different. Again, porter, the traditional style, and then you did your magic on it, and boom, here you go. First one. Was it a quick question because, like, you opened 3 years ago, so people were used to bigger beers and things like that. Do you think a beer like Smoky Poofs would have been a harder sell, say, 5 years before that? Like,
See,
you
I'm not a-
benefited
I'm
from
not a
coming
good one to
to
answer
it
this.
a little later?
When
Well,
John
you
met me,
know.
I was a Coors Light drinker through and through,
Okay.
so my
Yeah.
palate has come quite a long way since
Yes.
then.
All I would say is that absolutely we benefited from everybody that came first, and
Okay.
and really, we probably benefited more from some people pushing boundaries further than I think they should be pushed. Because what we're seeing now is a lot of drinkers are coming back to some core styles, and the knowledge of beer drinker is higher, so people just respect certain things a little bit differently than they used to.
Waving in some customers. they see the big setup here, like, can we come in? Yes,
Come on in, folks.
So yeah, I would say that again, going back to it, a smoked beer is always puts some people off, but this beer is not smoke forward. So
No, it's not. It's really good.
Again.
I talked to some brewers who were at the beginning of the movement, and it was a hard sell for some of them because people were used to drinking just Coors Light, or here in Chicago, they're drinking Old Style. That was
I was
it.
one of those people.
And I was too. It was Old Style and Miller Lite. And then but as you are exposed to different styles and exposed to different flavors, it makes it easier. So your point that, the people who came before made it not that it's an easy business, but made it a little more acceptable for people to try different beers.
There's a bigger population
Yes.
of people interested.
Well,
Yes.
and I would just like to end on that, like, quality, in my opinion, is still king. So
Yes.
you can put all the flavors you want to in a beer, but at the end of the day, if it's not a positive drinking experience and you don't want to have another one after you finish the first, then that beer probably did not hit all the marks that it could have. And so that's really what I want to see is the biggest feedback that I can get is I'll have another one of these.
There you go.
So
All right, well, if that's how you want to end it, that's how we end it. John and April Miller, again, the owners of BubbleHouse, thank you for joining us on this edition of Crafty Brewers, Tales Behind Craft Beer. Be sure to support your local brewery. Without your support, it is rough going for some of your favorite breweries. Crafty Brewers, Tales Behind Craft Beer is produced by our award-winning producer, Cody Goff. You can read our blog. Cody just put up a big blog about the new about stuff. So read the blog, grab some merch, check out episodes, and get in touch with us on our website, craftybrewerspod.com. Do you have a brewery that you would like us to talk to? Or are you a brewer who hopefully wants to come and have fun like John and April did? Did you have fun?
We did.
did have
Okay,
fun.
good.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they had fun. So if you're a brewer, you can come on with us too. Then you can contact us via email, the way that all the kids do it. CraftyBrewersPod@gmail.com is our email address. Follow us on social. It's crafty_brewers_pod on Instagram, Crafty Brewers Tales Behind Craft Beer on Facebook. And we have lots of fantastic merch available at CraftyBrewersPod.com. I'm wearing a piece now, but I also want to highlight, because the weather is getting colder, and perhaps on a Sunday morning, the first thing out of bed, you don't want to crack a beer. I don't understand you if that's the case, but perhaps you want to pour yourself a big cup of coffee. Check out the Crafty Brewers coffee mugs. Yeah, and the Crafty Mooers. We're going to do a dairy podcast next week. It's going to be fantastic.
They like the lactose.
Yeah, they do. Oh, it's utterly crazy. See what I did there, Cody? Horrible pun time on Crafty Brewers. But the beautiful, colorful logo, the insides, there's 3 different colors. Pick up that merch, or just peruse and spend money. You know, the holidays may be coming up, and people love gifts. And when you're at BubbleHouse, you can pick up some of their merch too, along with their great beer. So if you're listening on Apple Podcast, please tap your phone, give us a 5-star rating. Cody said, does that mean something? I don't know, but I trust Cody when it comes to that. So thank you again to John and April Miller. Thank you guys for being here. BubbleHouse Brewing is in Lisle, Illinois. Again, the address is
2121 Ogden Avenue, Unit A in beautiful Lisle, Illinois.
And it's BubbleHouseBrewing.com is the website. That much I know. For Cody Goff, I'm Brian Noonan. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you next time. Cheers.
I can have last words.
Oh, you can have a last word. You got any last words,
Usually
Cody?
Catherine has the last words, so she's
Oh,
not
you
here,
want?
so
You
I
got
can
any
have
last
the
words, Cody?
I do. When it comes to good brews,
That sounds morbid, by the way.
He drives very recklessly. This could be it.
when it comes to good brews, BubbleHouse Brewing Company is a Crokinole brainer.
Oh, fantastic. Well played.
Cheers.
I cheers to my microphone like an idiot. I have a beer in my
That doesn't work.
Cheers.